Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Halfway between Blakely and Henderson, Minnesota is a little state natural reserve along the Minnesota River. I grew up in a town nearby, and between my hometown and Blakely and Henderson we're talking maybe 8,000 people, 6,600 in my town of Belle Plaine. About an hour and a half from Minneapolis. We'd go down there to explore the woods, as you can find old concrete dens dug into hillsides where bootleggers would hole up and store product back in the day. On multiple occasions we've been down there, and after being in the woods for about 10 minutes we'd hear splashes in a nearby pond that progressively got louder and closer until we'd hightail it out of Dodge. This did not happen every time we were there. Picture the sound of a giant rock being tossed into the water. There's a lot of rumors about crackheads and escaped cons in the river bottoms. About a half hour down the road we have a asylum from the criminally insane that seems to have a breakout every now and again. And sure as shit rumor mill always places them down in the river bottoms by Belle Plaine. There's a lot of old wives' tales I could tell about the area. Most I've never totally bought, but a few might have some credence if anyone is interested. Alright, so there's this old house at the end of a neighborhood where the street turns to the right and goes down a hill, and it's pretty separated from the other houses by trees and this hill right on the edge of town. As the story goes, a crotchety old hard ass died about a decade ago without family, friends, and anyone close to him other than his dog. The thing is, even though the house is abandoned and is not on the market, and supposedly not passed on to anybody after his death, the lawn is mowed, the house hasn't seemed to deteriorate, paint, siding, shingles, and the fucking dog is still there. One night me and a couple buddies get the idea to go down and check the place out. So I drive my old pickup truck to the place, get to the top of the hill at the turn, and begin reversing down the hill. 2 guys are in the bed of the pickup, 3 in the cab with me. As we get closer, the acoustics of the hill make it so the damn place is silent. No birds, no animals, nothing. With one of the 2 main roads in and out of town being right around to the other side of the hill. We pull down to about 15 feet from the front door, when all the front lights flick on. We froze for a couple seconds. I mean, this geezer wouldn't be the only person who ever heard of motion sensing lights. That's when we heard the dog howl. We still couldn't see him, but he knew we were in his territory and he wasn't happy about it. The thing is, the dog was inside the house. Finally, the front door flew open, and I peeled our asses out of there. Never even made it inside. As we got to the top of the hill and back into the well-lit part of the neighborhood, we stopped and got out to discuss. The dog howled one more time while we were talking. The guys in back hadn't seen anyone when the door opened, and nobody could see the dog either. As we got ready to leave, we heard a single gunshot. Booked it, but haven't been back.
Good story. Smart backing in. How long ago was this? You might be able to look up who owns the property. Most cities and towns have some online shit for that.
It was about 3 years ago, might still be worth looking into. Most of the rest of my urban legends for Belle Plaine are explained away by people being meth addicts and psychopaths. There's a trailer park near the edge of town and close to the river itself that hosts a variety show of people threatening you with firearms, staring wildly as some of these people above have been stared at, stealing shit, making weird noises at night, that sort of thing. One unusual one is the ravine, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's right next to the school and is basically a legend from kindergarten until you graduate. My house was on the other side of the ravine from school, so I walked through it a lot when I was running late. Usual shit. Killers in the woods, abandoned barns with blood around it. This one's actually true. But it was a pothead hangout, nothing more. Bears, snarks, grumpkins, that sort of thing. One thing odd, however, is that almost everyone seems to get turned around in there. I've lived by the place my whole life, been there countless times, and I'm an incredibly good navigator, see military service, but I still will have to check the sun to make sure I'm walking the right way through it. Night is even worse. You could walk what you believe to be in a straight line for an hour, and have been walking in a circle the entire time. Most people can't navigate the damn place at all. Luckily for the most populated part of the ravine, it's narrow enough to see both walls. Final decent one that I can remember from the Belle Plaine stories. Belle Plaine exists as an old stopping point on the trip from St. Paul to Mankato, Minnesota back in the 1800s. Today, we're still that stopping point but for a 4-lane interstate. If you go up that highway for about 3 miles, you'll find an old abandoned farm literally right off the interstate. Which is where I once again pulled my pickup truck into with a group of friends in tow. This one is a little more simple. We began to weave our way into a pitch-black barn. As soon as we were inside, the noises of traffic were kill. It was as if the walls were soundproofed. For Christ's sake, we were 20 feet from the interstate. A few of us left our phones in the truck, but the couple that had brought theirs found their batteries dead or nearly dead when they swore up and down they had been decent on the ride over. Which I'm willing to believe since my truck came with every plug-in imaginable, because I drove our friend group everywhere and I am the consummate host. Anyway, as we're moving into this barn, shit keeps falling over. And banging fucking loud. Now, I wasn't hitting anything, and the others kept insisting they weren't bumping into anything that wasn't too big to fall down. As these bangs from shit falling over became more and more loud, I felt like I was being watched, and the moonlight outside bouncing off the snow was getting dimmer. The others reported similar feelings later on. Like most other stories, we got out of there as the spook factor hit ass-puckering levels. Those are the decent stories that I can personally attest to. There's some others like an albino fox that indicates someone is about to have bad luck, the boars that supposedly roam the area between us and the next town, stupid shit like that. One should keep in mind that, as someone above alluded to, rural Minnesota and rural Deep South are very similar in feeling, as someone who has lived in both. I gotta go run and complete a detail, but I can come back. I have a few deep Minnesota Northwoods stories. Granted, they aren't really near towns, but I may have one that's close enough. Alright, last Belle Plaine bro story, then I'm all out of spooks. I'm a natty guardsman and I go to a private liberal arts school in St. Paul after I moved from Belle Plaine. I'm actually posting from a deployment over in Egypt. But that's neither here nor there, just trying to maintain some consistency. My roommates back home come from particularly wealthy families, it being a private school and all. My best friend's dad is a real estate guy, owns a lot of territory across the state. One of which is a beautiful abandoned ski resort up north of Park Rapids, Minnesota. Just outside of the tiny hamlet of Emmaville. Emmaville markets itself as the smallest municipality in Minnesota. It's actually unincorporated, the lying cunts, but it has a church, school, a little store, a little campground and a one-family house. I'll get to Emmaville in a little bit. Now this resort is called Val Chatel, and if you've seen The Shining, I got the same feeling walking into this place. It's absolutely beautiful, just a little rundown. Sits on 2 private lakes and a fuckload of land that's all owned by my friend's father. Me and him and another roommate went up there for the 4th of July weekend as it was my last few days home before deployment. One roommate met us from Lake Park, near North Dakota, and brought us enough fireworks to make our own show. For the purpose of the story, JJ is my best friend whose dad owns the place, and TJ is the guy from near North Dakota. I'm packing an AR-15, a 7mm Rem mag, and a .410 side-by-side shotgun. JJ has a .22 pistol, and TJ fishes and doesn't fuck with firearms. JJ had gotten reports from a contractor looking in electrical stuff. They want to reopen the resort. Right before we left, that people had been fucking with the locks and had clearly been all over the grounds. So I was pretty happy that I had heat with me. Pic related, it's from the boat looking back at the west wing of the lodge itself. Right when we get there, JJ sets up a trail cam to catch the pricks fucking with the locks, and me and TJ start getting the boat in the water. It's devoid of human sound, only nature, absolutely pristine. He gets back from setting up the cams, we get on the boat and spend the rest of the evening till the sun goes down pulling fish out left and right. Beer drinking, dip spitting, it was about as good a time as I've ever had. Eventually we head back to the lodge, cracked a bottle of scotch and sat back for a relaxing evening. We were sitting out on the back porch when JJ snaps his head around and tells us to shut the fucking music off. Now, I don't hear as well as I used to cause I'm too cool, red as stupid, to use ear protection when shooting. So I snap the music off from my phone and look where his head's pointing. At this point, I heard what he must have at first, and that was a twig snapping in the brush. I'm pretty unflappable. I've spent too many long nights in the woods listening to large animals break twigs like that, but the step pattern seems to be human. But it is slow. We all listen for a couple minutes, to the occasional branch breaking, twig snapping, and vegetation being pushed aside and shit. Someone was clearly moving towards the lodge from one of the game trails. We're pretty isolated here, so it was immediately suspicious. I quietly grabbed the AR, and set up on the porch in that general direction. As I was doing this, music began to play from that direction. I honestly couldn't identify the genre, we could only pick up the beat. Now, again, nighttime in the woods sound carries like a motherfucker. We waited as this guy seemed to get closer. Then the noises stopped. All of them. We waited like 10 minutes before letting our guard down, and eventually turned in for the night, doors locked, weapons by our hands. Pic is lake from lodge porch, left side is where the game trail is. Next morning dawns, I'm an absurdly early riser, like 5 a.m. every day, alarm or not, so I'm up on the porch watching nature do its thing. Eventually the others wake up, and we cross the lake to fish some more. As we were crossing to the other lake, we heard a scream and all of us froze up. Honestly, I still am certain it was an elk that got fucked up by a wolf pack. Department of Natural Resources reports biggest pack in Minnesota moves through the area. But it was pretty disturbing, and the other two were pretty confused about it. JJ is a big hunter, he's been out in these woods. He couldn't even pin it down for certain. Elk really don't move through northern Minnesota as far as I can tell, so I really am not sure what we heard. Around noon we decide to head into Emmaville to get some food from the little convenience store. The old lady running the register glares at us the entire time we're in there. It's odd, their little shit hamlet runs on people like us being around to buy bait and snacks and shit. Being raised not like cunts, we were all incredibly polite, but contrary to everything I know about Minnesotans in the service industry, she barely said a word beyond grunting. Until JJ picks up a little rock on the counter that says, "Turn over in case of emergency," and on the bottom says, "Not now idiot, in an emergency." At which point she cackles like the crazy old hag she looks like. After stopping there, we went to a restaurant for lunch closer to Park Rapids. The people here again seemed very suspicious of us. It was very busy and filled with the people on the surrounding lakes, but us in particular they seemed to eye fuck hard. After overly expensive food, and shooting a few glares back, we went back to Valchatel. Final post. I hope that night comes and we find ourselves in the same position as the night before, except we're blasting fireworks off. I can't tell for sure, but I keep thinking I hear music that isn't ours floating in from somewhere else on the lake. I couldn't shake what I was hearing, and since I was inebriated I wrote it off to paranoia. The fireworks went on for another 40 minutes or so. When the last one went off, we sat quietly for a couple minutes, soaking it up. I mean shit, I was about to leave for 10 months and we're a tight group. But that's when all three of us heard a quiet laugh from somewhere out in the trees. Naturally we scrambled in and were all up in arms before you could say, "You were drunk, that wasn't safe." We didn't hear much more. A lot of rooting around in the trees, but it was so fucking dark out there wasn't anything to see. We drew the blinds and locked all the doors when we finally went to bed. JJ has been back twice since, has reported the movement and music in the forest. His dad has heard it too. The trail cam had gone off a couple times, but they couldn't see anything on it. A little spoopy, maybe alcohol-induced, maybe the Emmaville slugs coming for rounds, maybe an Indian burial ground. I dunno, but I'm eager to get back up there. That place is worth all the spoops. Thus ends all the Belle Plaine bro stories. Thanks for coming everyone.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentexts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.